Hello and welcome to the Galactic Family Podcast. Man, we've got a good one for you tonight, everyone. Tonight, we are joined by someone truly unique in the disclosure and aerospace world. Gene Sticco is a retired U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant, former global security executive, intel contractor, whistleblower, and the author behind Engineering Infinity, Earth's first interstellar blueprint, a recovered Cold War archive, now confirmed to match 85 to 95% of known U.S. black budget programs. This isn't just a UFO story. It's a blueprint of advanced energy systems, gravitational manipulation, and resonance-based propulsion created inside of a secret Soviet science program. Gene has worked with top investigators across the field and is bringing this historic material to the public for the first time. Galactic family, please welcome Gene Stitko and my co-host, George, to the Galactic Family Podcast. How is everyone doing tonight? Gene, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Good to see you, Jay. George, as always. Yeah.
Cool.
So just to start it off real quick, can we start off with who was your father-in-law and what classified or technical programs was he attached to?
Well, good question. Who was he? That's what we're learning. It's one of those things we've learned more about him probably since he's passed and since this dropped in our laps than my wife knew about him in life. From everything that we've gathered and all that we've put together, what do we know? So let's start with that, right? The early part. So he was born in Kazakhstan. His family and his upbringing was in an area that was very much associated with the Soviet military-industrial complex in southern Kazakhstan. His grandfather was a hero of the Soviet Union. He died in World War II during the Battle of Stalingrad. Prior to that, he was awarded medals for service to the nation in the fisheries industry. Actually, he was a mayor. So, he came from a politically connected family. Our understanding, as we've dove into this, he was identified early on as having, exceptional abilities in physics, which led to ultimately him being sent to the Riga Civil Aviation Institute, which was one of a few premier Soviet aerospace engineering and sciences academies. And again, contextually, and when we talk background, I'll jump around like this. You got to remember, Soviet Union. This wasn't like anyone that has a teenager getting ready to go off to university. They pick which is the best part of university they want to go to, right? The government told you where you were going to school. So for them to pluck a kid out of Kazakhstan and send him to the top school in Riga, he was already identified as having some talent. From that graduation, we know he lived in Kazakhstan for several years. He lived within a closed military city called Priazersk, which is associated with Kapustin Yar, the whole Russian Area 51, also missile base, communications, and all of that. And so he was both educated at the time and working at the time when the Soviet Union put together this mega UFO project that napped during the hearing, called one of the largest studies in the world, particularly by a state.
Yeah, I think Russian Area 51 is going to, people are now interested in this. It's coming forwards to not to piggyback off George Knapp. I think kind of your story and the way that you received these documents, and you know, your being your father-in-law from your wife's father, who sadly passed away, and then receiving these documents and then going, hey, why me? You know, why us? Why have you, you know, sent this across by aeroplane mail to arrive in your lap, and then what am I looking at? So I mean, kind of, I can only imagine day one opening those documents and going, that looks like a UFO, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was exactly what happened. As you're aware, I've said in other interviews. All we knew, he was sending some stuff for our son, for his grandson, who also, wants to. Now he's 17. He wants to pursue a career in aerospace engineering and things like that. So, it's grandpa. As the kid's 9, 10 years old, saying, "Oh, I want to be, in aerospace," and it's grandpa saying, "Well, I'm going to send some of my old work. Maybe he'll be interested in it someday." And it wasn't until after he passed that we did this deep dive into it. And George, you're right. That was exactly, I turned the page and I saw this thing and I said to Nat, "What is this? What does this say?" And she read it and it said, the technical specification of the UFO.
So I mean,
it couldn't be any clearer.
George Knapp has been on record as saying how he flew into the Soviet Union, met these high-powered generals, got these documents, and kind of snuck out without, anybody at customs really going through. And the story kind of entails a bit of intrigue there, a little bit of kind of casework. But a question I've got for you, Gene, would be: do you think your father-in-law took a risk by sending these things to you? Was it just because even though the it's the former Soviet Union replaced by what we have now, the Federation, do you think there was still kind of the old guard still hanging around, perhaps?
So I don't know too much about that in those moments, in the decision-making moment or
Right.
what have you. So what I've been able to piece together, I know from a book that was written by a Soviet colonel general. It came out in 2016, 2017. In this book, he talks about at the fall of the Soviet Union, so we're talking 1991-ish, Yeltsin, who was president at the time, was very keen to open the archives on everything and work cooperatively with the West, and the CIA starts showing up and poking around. In this book, he talks about there being a dedicated group of KGB officers who took a lot of the UFO information and began redistributing it amongst trusted networks in order to make sure it stayed protected. They did not want it falling into the hands of the West. So it makes sense that he would have, he was a patriot, for the times I spoke with him, which were only a few, only ever over video. We could have a good laugh about it, my background, and even at the time I had met him, he didn't know about the intelligence aspects of my background because I was still sort of unable to speak too publicly about that.
Yeah.
And so we had some laughs ideologically of the American patriot and the diehard communist.
Still friends, still family members, right? So it's
still family, right? Still family members. So my wife seems to have the impression that it might have been an act of rebellion, in a sense, that he didn't like a lot of the things that was going on in Russia in this period of time. We don't know if he knew he was sick. Things cascaded so fast. We never got to talk to him about these papers because we actually didn't look at them until after he was gone. So it's a great unknown. But I don't I don't necessarily agree that he did it out of an. I think it was very much as straightforward as he put it, and perhaps maybe he was laughing to himself.
Mm.
Oh, in 15 years, this kid's going to open up this stuff and have his mind blown because it's all UFO things and whatnot. And, maybe his grandson would become famous by, cracking some code once he became an aerospace engineer himself.
Cross fingers. Yeah. I think
Oh,
that leads on to the second question, and then I'll pass over. Well, yeah. So you received this. Was there any hint in the phone calls leading up? Did you know he was a scientist, a retired scientist, or did you?
Yeah. I mean, when I was in Riga, I mean, I lived there on and off for almost a year. Before we immigrated, to the US. Nat took me by the school. She's like, oh yeah, this used to be this where my dad went to school. This used to be the, academy here, and the old Soviet style logo is still out front. Yeah, I mean, again, it was one of those things. He was brilliant, but the fall of the Soviet Union shattered him.
Was there any hint about the UAP or reverse engineering until you got those documents, or rather opened them?
None. I mean, there was, she
Right.
knew he traveled back and forth to Kazakhstan. He went back and forth to Moscow. My wife went with him as a child to Moscow. He his circle of influence was at very senior Kremlin levels, diplomatic levels. Um, you know, a lot of this now is in retrospect, right? So, did he believe in UFO? Yes, if you brought up the subject to him, he would talk about it, and he would talk about it with certainty, and everyone thought he was crazy.
So I know you haven't you didn't get a chance actually to speak to him about it, about your father-in-law's, research and everything. But well, is there what technologies did you see when you looked at these documents, when you were looking through them? Were they all a certain technology, or were there certain technologies in there that you could specify and section out?
I had zero idea what I was looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of this is the shape of a UFO,
Yeah.
outside of what Nat could translate. Now, mind you, Nat grew up trilingual, actually,
Mhm.
Latvian, Russian, English, um, and I liken it to, again, anyone else who's not a physicist. You can pick up a physics book and you can read the words on the paper, but I can't explain to you what they mean, right?
Yeah.
So it was the same thing for her trying to translate this. In the first paper she's looking at, she's like, hey, he's refuting Einstein's theory of relativity. Who does
Oh,
that?
okay.
Um, and there were, things about nuclear and solenoid. So, plasma. There were common words. What it all meant, we had no
As
idea.
you're going through these, you're picking out those key words though, like the plasma, this, that, and you're just starting to put the pieces together.
Well, I mean, it was a process. We're talking, so it's 2019, December 31st, literally, 2019, he died. And so now we're in 2020 when we really start looking at these and examining them. And, I start, running through some loose, translations. And AI was obviously getting better. 2022, 2023 still wasn't fantastic.
Okay.
But and one of the things that jumped out right away to us was he was talking about 2024, that in
Hmm.
2024 there's going to be this shift in, because there were these gates, and humanity was passing through this sixth gate that's influenced by the Orion system, and that was going to lead to this split in society between 50% of society, where there's a break between the political elites and the oligarchy and the spiritual, and half of society is gonna. So now we're 2022, 23. Life is going on, and we're like, wow, this sounds an awful lot like the stuff he's talking about. Um, and we're reaching out, looking for help, looking for whether it was in the UAP community, the academic community, anyone who I could buy a cup of coffee for and be like, is there something to this, or is this like the ramblings of a madman, or is it like just old stuff and it's a nice family heirloom? And I couldn't get anybody to sit down with me. And so when 2024 hit and we kind of looked at the world, and I was like, if he's right about this, I'm going to guess he's right about whatever else is in here. Let's just push out a translation because my fear became, if we hand these to somebody, we might never see them again.
Exactly.
And I'm like, so let's push out what we can push out and get it out. And that's why it was published the end of 2024. And I never did anything with it. I did my press conference that kind of kicked off my entering this community June 11th, 2025. So we're going on December 11th. It'll be 180 days I have been in this subject matter publicly.
I think going back to the coming as a whistleblower from the oil industry, how would you feel that disclosure that you gave there is aiding you in this disclosure? Are you finding the skills, the similar skills in kind of, or is navigating the UAP arena a little bit more tricky? I don't know. Is it?
No, yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So no, it's a different kind of situation, first of all, in so much as the oil and gas side of the house is, part of a structured legal case. And, it's sort of the formalities that go on. It went all the way to the UK Supreme Court.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah. And, the now the real case will begin, I think, 2027. Entering this community and beginning to feel my way around, as well as assess what was going on. My background certainly did help, because it's the system. It's, I call it the apparatus that is at work when it comes to how information is controlled and managed. The whether you call it the politics or the intrigue or the intelligence, counterintelligence game, and all the rest of it. As I looked at it all, sort of, scoped out the field, and I sat back, I was like, all right, I've already done this before. This has been my life for 20 years prior. And in fact, in the grand scale of things, I did this at a much higher level. You're talking oil and gas and energy infrastructure and all the rest of it. So as I started seeing the games, the gatekeeping, all the rest of it, then it became like, I'm retired now. So it's like, well, now I've got nothing else to do. And if you want to treat me like I'm just some asshole off the street that's, come knocking on the door, then I'm gonna, I know how to play this game.
You know how to write a letter properly.
And I am playing it strategically. And me saying this is part of me playing the game.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your due diligence and bringing this to everyone. I know kind of like perhaps the oil whistleblowing and the case that's coming up is one thing, but this for us in our community is so very important. And I don't know, Jay, I mean, have you got any questions like to kind of come in off of that?
If I can just add to that for a second. Sorry, Jay, I don't want to.
No, go ahead.
But what I like in it too, and what made me a whistleblower, in the oil and gas industry, was the human rights aspect of it to a degree. right? And listen, it's oil and gas. It's a dirty business, right? Not gonna sugarcoat it one bit. But I'm also I'm old school in the sense of when you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, when you get caught, man up, right? So you play a tight, dangerous game. You get caught. Don't act like don't shrug off responsibility. And that's what they were doing. And from a personal level, there were many, many times I risked my life. I risked my life. My family suffered. My children suffered. I wasn't there. I gave my life in that period to that mission. And I'm not going to let you get away with trying to divert responsibility to some corporate shell game. That was my thing there. In this, not being part of this community outside of, I'd always say, sure, I guess there's something. Why not? I'd love to see it. Binging Ancient Aliens, maybe. That's, the scope and extent of what I knew really about, everything here. But the other thing, I certainly was aware of was the people whose lives were ruined through this. And so as I got into the documents, as I began making these comparisons, and as I began looking and saying, well, hold on a second, you're telling people they're crazy, but I'm looking at a body of UFO reverse engineering work. I'm seeing all of these programs in the government that are looking at this same kind of science, but you're going to ruin somebody's life to keep a secret. Doesn't fly with me. So that's became the crux of my thing is you've gotten caught. People know what they know. Don't tell them they're crazy. Don't ruin their lives. Don't disappear them. Time for the government to man up.
I hope so. I hope they do, and I hope they say, we're really sorry, and like we had to for these reasons, those reasons, those kind of things.
Absolutely, and that's why I say there's a balance that can be struck between transparency and accountability, and and making sure we're moving forward, these structures are dismantled, and to an extent, the case I had in the oil and gas world, we dismantled that structure. I'll do the same thing again here.
So when you were going down this rabbit hole of paperwork that you just got slapped, just literally slapped on your lap, you start translating, seeing all these similarities, then what comes to mind? Like then you went to programs in the US and started trying to see if they matched up with this research, or that they were repeating results from that research and maybe having some of those in those scientific papers you found.
So it was a literally like a 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning revelation.
Oh,
right? Saturday night into Sunday morning. And it came to me after Disclosure Tonight was talking about FOIA requests. And the FOIA requests being routed to Susan Goff from all the agencies and all the rest of it. And I woke up like at 2 a.m. with this thought in my mind. The best place to hide anything is out in the open. What if we don't ask about UFOs or UAP anymore? And our requests and our inquiries are scientifically based. Because right here I have this unified body of work. So if I just pull out the science in its little blocks and components, and figure out which agencies kind of explore these subjects. Let me see what I get back. And that was the process I did. And so I did like 4 FOIA requests at 2, 3, 3, almost 4 o'clock in the morning, whatever I could do online. And I did them to NASA, the Navy, the Air Force Propulsion Lab, and Sandia Labs.
Yeah.
Right? Structured them, filled them all out. So this was Saturday night into Sunday morning, 4 a.m. By like 10 a.m. Monday morning, NASA replied back that my request was improperly formatted and they were closing the case. The Navy replied back by email, copying in 4 other offices saying, do you want the stuff that's easily releasable or do you want, the additional research and this and that? And I kind of shook my head because now I'm thinking about what I've heard and learned in the past conversations. Is it usual within less than 1 business day to get a FOIA response back from any agency?
No.
And so then that made me think, well, what if it's all out in the open? And what if I just just do a broad search across the government or, across patents and declassified programs? And so I took the blocks of this science, limited first to the time period in which I figured my father-in-law wrote this, which, I call 1980 to 2000, right? Some of it might go a little later. There's some indications, but that's sort of my 20-year window. And I just said, let me see what happens. And everything started coming back to all the usual suspects. So that's what I'm saying. I didn't write anything about UFOs. I didn't ask anything about UAPs. I didn't ask anything about, declassified, nothing. Has this kind of research in these things ever been done? And it's coming back and it's like, oh yes, this program, this program matches it, 80%. This program matches at 95%. This program matches at 70. Stargate matches at, 54%.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's fucking interesting result to have, pardon my language, and for the strike. I mean, we're talking a cold outreach that references back everything that I'm hearing in the community, the programs that everybody talks about. So, it's beyond I actually ran the statistics, and it was there was a 1 in a 10 to the 630th power chance that it would be coincidence. So that is a 1 in 1 with 630 zeros behind it chance.
That's
it's coincidence.
I would argue it's not coincidence. It's probably de facto is what it is, and there. Jay, shall we move on to the technology section a little bit?
Yeah, that's fine. Because like I said, we had some of the questions that were worded around what did your father-in-law say on this and that, and I had forgotten that you had mentioned that you didn't get the chance to speak to him about it beforehand. So
yeah, it's I think kind of like as an outsider, not related to you in any way, Gene. I think like for me, your father-in-law, maybe he was sticking 2 fingers up back at the state. Maybe he was a visionary and he saw more than the average person and thought, well, this needs to be, instead of mothballed, it needs to be put out there. And hey, here's my son-in-law and my grandson. And more power. And I doff my cap to the father-in-law and the family there and the studious work. And I don't know. I mean, like Jay, just segueing quickly about kind of Russia and kind of how you I wanted to, I don't know if it's okay to touch on quickly. You'd emailed George Knapp and he'd refused to kind of contact you. and then effectively then came out with his story about kind of Russia and so forth again, and yet doesn't want to look at the documentation to see if it marries up with his. I mean, we obviously the community is always full of controversy. We like him, we don't like him, we like him, we don't like him. But I think kind of on a data level, hey, if in the background of George Knapp's office, if he's got documentation from Russia, does it marry up with what the documentation you have in your possession? Surely that's interesting for me. For me,
well, George, also, we can also put that out since we're live now. It's an open invitation. George Knapp, if you're watching this, or if it gets to George Knapp, or if anybody wants to give this to George Knapp, we will have him on here to discuss with Gene Russia documents to Russia documents. If someone wants to get a hold of him and he actually responds back. But go ahead, George.
Yeah,
that George.
No, I just think like Gene has in his possession verified Russian, former Soviet Union scientific papers concerning the use and generation and creation of UAP UFOs, reverse engineered or alien reproduction vehicle, however you want to term it. It's in Cyrillic, it's in Russian, it's been translated in part. It doesn't really make a huge amount of sense to non-scientific community physicists. However, George Knapp is sat there where he is with a whole load of documents which everyone takes as gratis, but we haven't been able to tuck into. I just want to know, do they look similar? Was this the same team? Was this from my outside perspective? Gene, I don't know if you want to come in on that at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can spend a couple of minutes here. I can give you a little bit of history on it. So, George was certainly one of the first names that popped up, again, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Yep. There were a number of times I reached out and, sent screenshots, sent screenshots. I got it on a Google Drive. Essentially saying, right, you're okay, you've got all these things from Russia. Here's what I've got. Would love to have a conversation. Can you spare 20 minutes? I don't need to be on Weaponized. I don't need to be on the Coast to Coast. Would love to have had a conversation. Mm-hmm. And again, gentlemen, the world I come out of, right? Logic would tell me you are an investigative journalist. This subject is a major part of your background. You should thirst for new documentation that comes in. So I always found that odd. So in June, when I did the press conference, coincidentally, somebody had posted a video of an interview with Knapp from like 94, 95, or maybe even a little bit later, but him talking about the Russian documents. And so it blew my mind, because then I downloaded the video and remixed it and started, threw up screenshots of particularly the pages that had UFOs on it. And I reposted it, tagging everybody. So where he's like, there were these documents that had, the reverse engineering of UFO. And it's like, boom, like this, George, question mark, question mark, question mark. So he reaches out through Instagram, said, oh, I never saw anything. Can you send it to me? Yes. Yes. Send him and those I've colored for dramatic effect for the presentation. So sent it to him, never heard anything back. But I still, then there's with Corbell, they're doing these things. I'm the champion of disclosure, and anyone who has information, you come see me. You come, I'm trying. I'm a veteran. I'm a whistleblower. Why don't you like me? And it just defied logic to me on why I would not get engagement. It took like a second time for me calling him out, where I got an email from an assistant offering me like a slot on Coast to Coast, which was going to be at like 1 a.m. I am not that into this, that I am waking up at 1 a.m. Right?
100%.
The book is, it's on the website. It's in a flip book. Yes, you can, download and buy a download. Yes, you can buy the book off of Amazon. Any money that comes in from it goes to the opera company. We have a nonprofit opera company. I'm not dependent on this for my life. I am not an author. This is not my income. This is not my retirement. Whatever.
Yeah.
I can pay for the website and good. I'd be happy. Right. So I'm not getting up at 1 a.m. Right. It's not going to happen. However, I sent a very nice email back. I'd be happy to pre-record something. I'd be happy. Again, I'd just love to have a private conversation.
Sit down. Yeah.
In the meantime, I had reached out to Robert Hastings, the author, who did a great bottle of work on the nuclear relationship with UFOs. Former Air Force Security Forces, security specialist. That was my world, nuclear weapon system security. So I connected with him, sent him the work. After about, a few weeks, he wrote back. He said, "This is way over my head," but I gave it to David Grush. And David said it's interesting. And, he hadn't seen it. So I replied back, "Thank you. Would love to have a conversation with David Grush. Here's my information. Please have him reach out and I can sort of give him the 10-cent tour before he dives into it." Nothing. So now I've got to play the game. So now I'm pinging Matt Laszlo. Matt, you want to ask a politician a question? Ask Burleson about the documents that were sent to David Grush that would blah, 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 and I start doing that way. About 2 weeks later, I get my visit from the FBI at, the house on their fishing expedition, which again, I come out of that world, not intimidated, happy to have the conversation. I invited them to grab some people, grab a 6-pack of Sam Adams, come back and sit in the back while I have my cigars any day, and I'll be happy to roll through everything with them as well. And then within a couple of weeks after that, we get the hearing announced. And after 40 years, Knapp is going to talk about Russia, and Luna wants to know what Russia knows, and all the rest of it. And that, again, having worked a lot with government through my career and Senate staffers and all the rest of it. The time I was in the oil and gas industry is when Homeland Security was created, when Homeland Security was starting the sector coordinating councils, when Senate staffers needed to understand chemical security. I was one of the guys that brought them around. When they created their Office of Enforcement and Chemical Security Inspectors, they wanted to hire me to be one. They didn't pay enough, right? I understand how the system works. So when I saw that frame to me, and particularly once Knapp's the Thread 3 documents came out, and the Thread 3 documents, my father-in-law's work, is pretty much a point-for-point answer to certain sections of it on the materials and engineering part of those papers, right? Then I happened to be out in Vegas, maybe not so happened, but I was out in Vegas in an event George was at, and I was able to catch a minute with him to be able to say, "Hey, your Thread 3 things?" And he's, "Oh yeah, you're the Russian file, yeah, I'm that guy." So they were 1-for-1 match. And man, I've got the video. Nat took it, I said they were a 1-for-1 match. He's, "Well, I'd love to see that." Fantastic. I'll email them to you. Emailed them to him within a couple of days. That was back in September. Still haven't heard anything back again. So what this tells me from the intelligence side, and what I've put together based on all the statements in his testimony, my belief is that the documents that he brought back from Russia, the Thread 3 that he released, was sort of the orders section, the cover sheet, and some of the background information. There's a body of that he turned over to Bigelow and DARPA and the advanced aerospace
threat identification,
that group there.
Yeah.
And all of that. So I've always said I believe my father-in-law's work was part of the bigger program, which again, preponderance of evidence shows that it is. And that what I got was likely his personal versions, draft versions, There's a number of, there's different types of paper. Some of them you can see are carbon copies, which means the original went somewhere else. The language and stuff speaks to it being written for somebody else. So I always knew it was part of a bigger body of work. I think whatever it is sitting within those other documents that Nat brought back and handed over. And now there's a bit of a conundrum because those are likely classified. And if you're engaged with me on, the back notes and the early notes, they then run the risk. If they confirm anything, they run the risk of, number one, admitting what was in the documents that he turned in the first place. And so my hope is that the process they're going through is a method to unravel that complication. If not, then it's either they want to unwrap that to have the conversation, or they want to just, control and own that narrative and, want to just continue to dampen, my footprint in all of this so that it doesn't throw off the rest of the narrative, because a whole bunch the narrative in a whole bunch of ways.
Yeah, I think kind of if a portion of those documents of NAP are fully classified, and you're like, hey, what about this? You're like you got this. I'm a private citizen. This is it's information that so we often, like in the topic, talk about societal change, how it's going to affect people on like a theological, philosophical, just to paraphrase Lou from a recent documentary film. But it's just like, hey, if the information that you have in your possession, Gene, and is in the book as well, I might stress, is going to enable people to really tunnel down on these kind of like over the horizon technologies, or in the word, to paraphrase your father-in-law, like going against Einsteinian relativity in physics, or post-Einsteinian physics, then it opens up a vista for the planet yet again. I think it's extremely important that the information that you are holding as a guardian for everyone else is protected and also disseminated. I think is the kind of thing here.
Yeah, and and it's sort of a major misstep, because there was that 4-year period of me trying to engage with people and sending these things around, where whether it was they took a look at it and then just said, oh no, let's just ignore this, or they didn't see it, whatever it was, there was an opportunity in that time for somebody to have taken a look and then picked up the phone or made a visit and said, this is problematic and we can't tell you why, but we know you're a veteran. We know you don't want to. And I'm telling you, I would have handed them right over and been like, bless America. And nobody would have ever, heard from me.
I think I've heard you somewhere say, I just wanted to get rid of this stuff and like be done with it and kind of get it out,
Yeah. And I mean, and honestly, and even in publishing the book, right? That was my own. I'm like, listen, maybe once it's out, because of course everyone does the same thing, right? They're in Russian. Oh, they need to be translated. Okay, you translate them. Oh, the translation's not good enough. Whatever. Do it yourself. They're here. Everything's published.
Yeah.
I didn't. You should have published it as a scientific paper. I'm not writing a scientific paper. I have no interest in writing a scientific paper. Right? You want to take them and write a scientific paper on them? Take it. Do it. You need a license? I'll give it to you. Right? I don't want or need anything out of it. But just like you said, George, as we struggled with this or I should say struggle, but we had a lot of discussion about it as a family too. The idea that these were a gift to his grandson. He was a patriot of the Soviet Union. Would
yeah.
we have wanted them made so public and all the rest of it? And so our grand compromise was this idea of let's properly archive them, and make sure legally they are transferred to our son at a certain age and time, that they are protected, as you'd protect any significant family, document. But if there might be an inherent value to humanity.
Yeah.
And do we have a greater responsibility to share them from that perspective?
I
And
think
that's
I think
sort of
I
the
think
path we went on.
I think so, and I think it's a noble cause as well. 100% behind you, Gene, in getting this out. I think stuff leaks out of USA, stuff leaks out of everywhere slowly over time. But when you've got a red hot potato like this in your hands, I can only imagine what it is to go, hold on, okay, wow, like to have this stuff, and then bigger implications kind of coming out for wider society. And yeah, okay, I'm not a scientist either. I don't speak the language of physics. But I know people who are armchair physicists who would love to get a hold of this information and piece it together a bit more. You
Yeah.
know, Jay, I don't know, like, yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
So,
And there are quite a few people doing it. There are people and businesses in the advanced aerospace sector that I know are using this. There are so I've had a couple of Russian speaking physicists, finally found them, who've reached out, and they are reworking all the translations and the physics and tightening it down so that there can be more discussion of the physics sort of for the layman, to read. Right now, admittedly, it's a dense, read. I have a friend who's a electrical engineer, and he'll write me at 4 a.m. He'll send me a text. I'll wake up in the morning and see it, and he's like, "Yeah, I started looking at this at 10 p.m. last night, and I just looked at the clock, and it's 4 a.m. and I need to get some sleep." So there's those guys. There's two more people with physics, the background in physics,
and
who are
stuff.
diving into it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want to talk about some of these on this slideshows, Gene, you're more than welcome to flip through and show people on the slideshow what you were presenting before. These are the works that you found within the body of your father-in-law's research, right?
Correct. So it's 119 pages in total, and he has them. He titles them, as works, and so these are the high level titles of each section of those works. Gravitational charge dualism, that is essentially his answer to the theory of relativity. He goes in, the propulsion systems, the current. He talks about the mass of objects, in the sense that the craft manipulate the magnetic and gravitational fields, and that's what they access in order to, as we learned in Age of Disclosure, create the bubble around them. That is what creates the bubble. And then it starts getting into these things like the consciousness field interactions, lunar cycles, and civilization development. Why these things are important and relevant to it is because this is how the craft is piloted. So it's the combination of mechanically manipulating the gravitational and magnetic field to lift and shape and maneuver the craft. It is piloted, in a sense, by an interface of the pilot with what he calls the information energy field. And in these sections, he talks about, and this is where the 2024 thing came in. He talks about the rise and falls of civilizations, the rise and falls of societies as a separate element of civilizations, and the development of humanity towards becoming more connected to the universal energies, and particularly this information energy field. And so this becomes, again, I and it obviously by now I bet tons of people like, oh, this sounds like psionics. It sounds like that. Yes, it sounds like. That's why I always tell people, I'm like, I hear these things and I want to say to everybody, I think you're right, but you're right for the wrong reasons. And it's like, just read this and it might tighten it up and clarify it for you, and actually puts, math and physics behind it. So it is all of these things go into humanity's development to get us to this point where our mind is attuned. It talks a lot about resonance and attunement and things like that. So that's what's covered, in all of those sections. And as well, the tripartite nature of human consciousness. So all of these things, the measurements of the galaxies, again, all of those are the factors that go into how the craft, operates. And again, so this is the unifying theory.
Yeah, and I was going to say, we had someone, return abductee, say, so did someone just copy this, this work? And that's what you were saying also when you had they didn't copy, they took aspects from certain parts of it and they were able to make companies based off of this research.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, and that's what I'm saying, and people, and that's a fair challenge, and I've had a challenge in other ways of, maybe you got information from here or there or da 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 da. We're talking 1980 Soviet Union working inside a classified program, right?
Yeah.
Even following that period. So we know in what were more recent times, let's say in the 2010s or whatnot, he was still followed by Russian intelligence, FSB. We have somebody he was in a relationship with who told us stories about, him still being under surveillance even in the years following. Just pop through again.
Yeah, you just run through it. Yeah.
The material hull composition, this is fascinating because, again, as I researched, I went through, using the science and looked at, can we use the science and the engineering to explain common phenomenon that people witness? And the answer is yes. I have a list of them. It's still up on the website. It should be under the investigative tools. There's 50 or 60 common criteria that's reported, and each one of them has a scientific explanation based upon this body of work. So the colors that people observe are not necessarily lights that the craft is generating. It's because of the environmental conditions that change as the craft enters our space, causes environmental change, thunderstorms, lightning, things like that are some clues. And because of the materials, the way the materials would then interact with high ionization, whatever the case might be, could produce a bluish light, a reddish light, an orangish light. So there's all these environmental conditions that affect the colors of the lights that people, might observe. And when I talked about, so this is a bottom view of the craft, and it's 4 quadrants. And so the piloting, the craft is there in its bubble, and all that's being manipulated are these panels in order to change its position within that energy field that it has generated for itself. So we witness it as abrupt maneuvers at high speeds and all this and that. The craft itself doesn't experience that. It's just modulating itself ever so slightly within this system. But what we observe and what we're able to process looks like the zooming and all the rest.
Yeah, me and George were talking about that before too, Gene, that it's almost like a gravitational lensing effect when they're like moving around, but it's you can't see them. You can see them, but you can't see what it actually looks like on the inside.
And the part in red down there, I like, I think is again, I like it as an explanation that the craft falls towards this artificial gravitational gradient that it's generated itself.
Oh, okay.
On the previous slide, the silicon and germanium. A little nascent fact that you guys probably already know is obviously kind of the Roswell crash happened in July 1947, but in December 1947, Bell Laboratories created the first transistor using germanium crystal. Right. And I'm not saying back engineering going from valve computing to transistors, but hey, it's a heck of a leap, right?
Well, I'll say it. Some of this we already talked about, sort of the methodology here.
Yeah.
I did the research. Can we defend against it?
The defense part of it was very interesting.
Yeah, that became, my question is, so do we have, if this is how the craft operates, what kind of systems would need to be developed to knock it out of its flight path, or to defend against it, or dampen its ability to operate? As I began researching that's what I found. We have exact systems that could defeat the type of craft that is outlined in these documents. So, coincidence? Perhaps.
Yeah, it's
this is a whole other rabbit hole. But I'll just, George, just to follow up. Well, and real quick, again, these are the, this is sort of that large view of, and how I try to visualize it, that these are the areas, these pieces of core science that we've been able to find, publicly available open source intelligence information, declassified documents on, and correlate how much of it, directly mirrors the combinations of systems that is described in the book, and then adding to that the patents that have come out, particularly the U.S. Navy patent, and I call that the smoking gun. We can get into that later, but what I wanted to go to, George, was what you were talking about was that, December 47, they, start using this. That was one of the other areas that I discovered that was really the real utility of the book, was that now we had a timestamp, right? We knew between, we had a scientific footprint to operate off of that could say, all right, all of these things together equal a UFO, right? And we had a time frame in which it was done. And I began to look at the advancement of the science, not just from the period it was written forward, but then backwards. What was being done in these fields beforehand? And what began to emerge was this pattern where following a reported event, a big crash, let's say, and I sort of, started with Magenta in Italy. There's a cycle. You see the event, the denial, then you see a period of scientific development in these same areas that wind up in the book. So, like, where is it here? This circulating airframe, the triangle aircraft. You begin to see these things in early iterations to my father-in-law's work, and then you see them exponentially sort of increase afterwards. Again, not to credit him with everything in the world, but if we, take into consideration the Roswell crash, the crashes in Russia, if we accept in that post-World War II period there were likely a number of crafts that a number of nations had and began setting up the systems and the structures to reverse engineer them. Then the progression of science starts to fall in quite nicely within those categories. And following that period of scientific development, then you begin to have the public facing statements. So the Project Sign and the Project Blue Book and everything that comes out and gets released after that, and they just fall within these pulses of periods of years from from immediate to 16 years to 34 years to 54 years. You start seeing this cycle repeating itself.
I can remember when I first got a desktop PC, and a friend of mine who was already gifted said, "Oh, you got some alien technology," and just threw it away. And I'm like, "What the hell are you on about?" But it's just like, okay, we can almost feel this already, and I think, okay, the pulse model.
Yeah, so this is just essentially what I was just describing. This is the more.
Oh, you've modeled it, so you're
written more eloquently than I say it.
Okay.
Rapid
event
institutional. Yeah. And so, if we, even if we tried to think it out loud, so development windows tend to, what technology has been released over the last 10 to 15 years, right? If we go from 2010 to 2025, what leaps in technology have we made? And then what's the period before that it would have taken to be developed out of another 5-10 years? So, then find the event. There's an event in those windows that begins to make you question. Again, it's a roadmap. I can't stress enough. I don't mean to come across as anything being definitive, except for the idea that of this being a tool by which to measure other things, by which to bounce. And never mind, the science is falsifiable and all that good stuff. Again, anyone who wants to dive into it and run it down, more than welcome to. Because then anyone wins a Nobel Prize, at least send me an invitation. I always like a good party.
Yeah, I wonder why, it would make sense from, something crashes, we don't know what it is, we're going to retrieve it. Oh, look, we've figured this out. We've broken it off. We've compartmentalized the technology so that the whole is obfuscated from these companies that we're using with their scientific acumen to back engineer.
Right.
So we're going to break off this little bit of fiber optic. Okay, you've now just discovered fiber optics. You've just discovered transistors and crystal technology. You've just discovered. Okay, and then slowly and surely, the footprint of this, these patterns, this kind of blueprint that you have for engineering these kind of things, it becomes apparent that the powers that be would want to hold on to this as much as they are able to, whereas us on Civvy Street don't get, I know I've got contacts who've worked in various positions within the UK military, Ministry of Defence and so forth, and they have access to things that will blow my mind as a civilian, things that are upcoming, things. So an example would be like, we're all aware of Neuralink as a technology from Elon Musk. How long was that in development? Have we already got this working as a thing? And if so, is it been deemed now it's in the public domain for corporations to mass produce large, Japanese companies to bring out this technology and so forth?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's all converging in some way, and we could go on to a whole diatribe about AI and the operating system and these kind of things. But I think absolutely, 100%. Within that section, finding out the blueprint for crash back engineering, technology availability, within a 10 to 25 year window, you can clearly track it.
Right. And and this is where it gets interesting, and this is where I think what makes the disclosure issue both fascinating and highly complex. And it's, again, I'm able to relate it to my oil and gas experience, in this way. The oil and gas world, right? Energy is national security. Energy security is national security. However, infrastructure is owned by private industry, and private industry owns that infrastructure around the world. Now, at the end of Easy Oil in the 2000s, nations began creating their own nationalized oil companies and owning that infrastructure for themselves, but they still needed to rely upon the private sector apparatus to make it all work and bring it all together and get it all out to market and the rest of it. And so you have this world that I was operating in, where as private industry, we were able to have connections and contacts both with the nations in which the companies were incorporated in, who had a vested interest in seeing that company be a success and help with the national energy issues of its home nation. And then you had the host nation that it operated in, that the infrastructure was owned by a private entity who had loyalties to another country, but was of national importance, to themselves. So in the same way, this structure's repeated itself, and I started calling it, the UAP industrial complex, right? The government.
It makes sense. It makes sense.
The government has, so as the taxpayer, we have funded the retrieval of these materials in these crash sites. When it comes in, the government then spreads out the study of it, and it begins to become compartmentalized, right?
Yep.
And then as the taxpayers, and when they do that, it's either a sole source contract or they put out an RFP over the system. And then as the taxpayer, we begin to pay these private companies to engineer the things that the materials that we paid for to be recovered. And then once those materials are assessed and created, it's a windfall, because then what happens? Then more taxpayer dollars go into buying the end product of the weapon system that was developed out of it, or we get a nice fancy shiny thing we get to spend $1,000 on, to make our lives allegedly easier and operate more efficiently. And again, in the hearing that I'd love to see happen is the oversight committee asking, so we've funded all of this stuff. What exactly was the payback for the public?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where and when? Here's one for Elon Musk and Doge to go after. Where and when has the U.S. taxpayer recovered our investment in recovering technology and paying to have it analyzed and formed into some end product? Because all I know is, what we get out of it's really expensive for the average person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and did now looking into that, like you saw though where your father-in-law's research could be like into these private companies, like the different aspects of it, could be used in different contracts that were out there that were already inside of this research. If you could like pull it apart the right way, you could do this on these contracts.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, there's contracts that are out in the system right now that I could actually bid on and write a proposal to. And I mean, again, there's part of me that wants to do it just to see if I wind up winning one of them, because how funny would that be? Right. And that's what I'm saying. And again, don't get me wrong, it's not that nobody else has ever done any of this science in,
Yeah.
all the rest of it. It's the combinations, it's just to go back to one of those earlier slides that I think
Yeah, you're
explains it.
combining different aspects of the work in general and
Right.
putting it into something else.
So, this is looking at the, around the solenoids and the Pays patent. And these are the things we're talking about of the fingerprint that before 2000, nobody put all of these things together in the same package. So
So the math in general
this
is
is
what we're looking at.
right. This, the gray box, I think, again, for me is what, helps me frame it. No car before 2000 had a lithium battery, going doors, autopilots, and a touchscreen all at once. All of those things existed,
Mm.
but when you put them to Elon Musk, put them together, and we got a Tesla. So in the same way, all of these things existed scientifically, and it's the fact that he put them together to reverse engineer a UFO, and then 20 years later, the same combination shows up in the Pays patent for the U.S. Navy triangle.
And I seen that too when I was younger. I actually I came across that too. In my younger days, I came across that triangular like craft on and it was a patent, and I was like, oh my god, like there it is.
And so if we return to the timeline and the pulse theory, right? So this becomes more of a geopolitical pulse because 91 you had the fall of the Soviet Union. Up through 96 you had there was actually a program like Paperclip after World War II.
Yep.
We had one where the US brought over 700 to 1,000 top level Soviet scientists, physicists, mathematicians, all the rest of them. So within months, they were, cleared, had top secret clearances, and are now working inside the Defense Department. And, Pay still works for the Space Force. He's still active. Some of them now are in universities and things like that. But you
Mhm.
had, what we call the brain drain period of 96 or so. So you give them 3, 4, 5 years to get acclimated. And then starting in 10 years later, we start seeing things rolling out. So
Wow.
again, it fits the pulse, but it's a geopolitical pulse that happened from the brain drain. It's that, when it came to the money and the numbers, right? 1980 to 2000, they spent $15 billion over those 20 years, right? From 2000 to 2025, we spend 150 billion. So we have a 10 times increase in spending in the 20 years following the brain drain than we did in the previous 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Right?
it make it make
And
it,
Knapp brought back the documents from Russia in 1993.
mhm.
So now
Yep.
we're 20 years after bringing those documents back. That
If
we
you
start
if you
seeing
if
products.
if considering the pulse and the blueprint that you've discovered based on these nascent facts, if you could put a futurologist hat on for a moment, Gene, and predict the next 10 to 25 years in the future, do you think that it snowballs? Do you think this technology rapidly becomes more and more and more until we're more products to purchase, these kind of things, more gadgets, more and ultimately will it end up with us like the Jetsons?
Well,
You know,
I think so. It's possible. One of the things I did, so people have asked, they're like, "Well, why didn't you just patent this all? When you got it?" And
right?
send it.
Yeah.
Again, I went with the, like the Jonas Salk. It's for the benefit of mankind. So I
Yeah.
gotta, Now that's not to say I didn't come up with a few derivatives, and one of them being a personal transportation craft that would
Okay.
use a lot of the same, conditions. And I've got designs and things for that. We've got some patents in. Um, just even more so for the fun of it. But running down those numbers, it's like, oh, you know what? With $3 billion in 5 years, we could actually make this happen. We could make this real. So what will happen? It all depends on what happens with, disclosure and, the follow on after the age of disclosure and the momentum and what everyone's talking about. Will Trump be the disclosure president? So my position. Sorry. Yep.
I hope the taxpayers push back a little bit, right, and get their officials to work for them, be it the commander in chief of the United States of America, who again is working for those taxpayers.
No, exactly. But the reality of it, I've always said, is the moment, barring the catastrophic disclosure scenario, the moment of the head of state stepping out and making the declaration, and that's really what becomes the key factor, right? And they talked about it in Age of Disclosure too. The impact on markets and the economy and all the rest of it. So nothing's going to happen, or it's not going to happen, or when it happens, it must be a political win. It will be it will be done at a strategically or politically strategic time. It's not going to be just because, okay, now I'm ready. It's going to be because there is a political win out of this. So I think the signals we are seeing is certainly leading towards Trump doing this. I imagine the next logical step, and I've shared this on X, the next logical step is to form a presidential commission, bipartisan, scientific focused. And in that commission, we'll include all things. Where are the roadblocks? What needs to be changed? Whistleblower protections. The commission itself can't give whistleblower protections, but it can then give to Congress the things that need to happen. That would be a pretty good 26 midterms thing to have on the agenda of what needs to get done, is to have this sort of commission either active or finished up by then. How long it would particularly take them, who knows? But I could see this, starting to happen in the new year. So off of the commission, then he has the ability to, have the Oval Office moment, and maybe that moment comes in early 2027 as we start talking about who's positioning themselves for a 2028 GOP nomination and who's Trump going to get behind. That Oval Office moment of, here's the results of the commission. So now it's not Trump saying, hey, I'm a smart guy and I knew this. It is the commission that's bipartisan, that's full of scientists, that opens that door. People still aren't going to be happy with it because it probably won't. Maybe it'll have some more photos and things like that. But it's the next logical stepping stone. And then you have whoever the heir apparent is going to be emerges at that point. Rubio, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor right now, or in acting, certainly has already spoken and is a advocate of the issue. So now he gets to campaign as, I'm the one who's going to carry on, this work. I'm the one who's going to see it through and get these things implemented and open the doors and start rolling this stuff out. And so it's a long way for a short drink of water, George, I know, but to get to your question, what do we see? What we see out of that then starts becoming the toys and trinkets that keep us happy and distracted looking at shiny things and happy about all of this new information that's coming out, because now I have a, quantum level laptop or quantum level iPad that allows me to, look in the next dimension, 400 feet, whatever it is. there'll be a circus for the masses, right?
It does feel like smoke and mirrors a little
Right.
bit.
Nero will give us the games
Yeah.
as this consequential ontological reality, begins to take shape around us. And, and the fact of the matter is, they've only got to manage people like the three of us at least for what, maybe the next 30, 35 years at best, maybe for you guys. If I got 15 in me, I'm happy the way I'm going. But it's not, they don't have to satisfy us, right?
Yeah, I know.
They've
I
got
mean,
to
but
set the
there's
stage in the next 2 generations to begin living in a new normalized reality. And within 3 more generations, 3 or 4 generations, everybody who knew the world before there was life in another planet will be gone anyway.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up 2 videos real quick, Gene. One is, I know you had discussed, paperclip, and you said, about bringing the scientists over and everything. And I have Oppenheimer
Yeah.
and his famous quote
The
when,
world would not be the same.
hold on, let me get it
Few
here.
people laughed.
There we go.
Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Not a truer word said. Not a truer word said.
Absolutely.
And I think what popped into my mind listening to Oppenheimer speak there was, the hegemony of energy. What came out, some recent knowledge for me, is the classification system of the Department of Energy being separate from everyone else.
Yes.
And how oddly you found yourself working in the oil industry.
Mm-hmm.
And those people maybe don't want this clean energy coming out because you can't charge for it if everyone's got their own personal water-based system in the back.
Yeah, I mean they'll still do all right. There's still there's a lot of stuff. I always chuckle to myself when people say, "Oh, let's not buy gasoline for a day," and or let's just drop fuel to or fossil fuels tomorrow. And I had a friend, we were driving along, and she was talking about well, we just need to go to ethanol and okay, well, what are you willing to give up? What do you mean you give up? Because the corn's got to be grown. The corn, and it's a it's different type of corn, and so we still need to produce the corn for everybody to eat. And so where are we going to plant the corn that's going to become ethanol to meet the demand? Where is the infrastructure that's going to process and produce it? And where do you want to put that? Right. So nothing's an overnight solution. It is, again, generations of infrastructure that needs to be built to make these transitions. So I think the companies, again, are in bed enough and smart enough that
do you think they've got a future blueprint for this technology, like teasing it out so they maximize their profits? And you've already it is a dirty business.
Well,
but it's based around kind of like shareholders, put it that way. Or
listen, there's there's personal phone calls between heads of state and heads of oil companies, and they've got one another's cell phone numbers, and I know somebody now who is in a nationally prominent position and which is again basically in private industry and whatnot. And he when he calls Trump, Trump answers the phone.
Hmm.
You know,
That's a fair amount of power. That's a fair
Yeah.
amount of power as a private individual.
And so, you know, again, that is common. So I liken it to the, you know, the idea when, you know, when the next iPhone comes out, right? The same day that's released and you want to buy a third party charger for it, right? That charger is already available. Well, how they know what the attachment, what the dingle or dongle or the this or that. Well, they've known about it for 3 years when Apple designed the phone, and Apple brought them all in and said, okay, here's what's coming next, and here's the specifications. And they all went back and started creating the, you know, $100 connector for it, and they started creating the $3 gas station connector for it. And it's all, you know, released. So in the same way, just at a larger, more consequential scale, this is what happens behind the scenes to move, you know, major things forward like this.
Like social engineering almost, like it's like putting the pre-programming in the media and the sound bites, getting the documentaries out, getting the technology to be understood to a point that you can release the next one rapidly. But it might, you know, my observation is there feels like there's a little panic, especially maybe on the Hill, you know, like having viewed the recent documentary Age of Disclosure, there seems to be like this pushback kind of going, you know, the box is open, Pandora's box is open, and there's people trying to push it back closed, saying nothing to see here. But we're already going. You know,
again, I think a good example is the confusion of some people online who are like, how the hell is this being talked about for an Academy Award already? Right. Well, again, there's, you know, the Academy Awards, in order to be eligible, it has to be released in 2025. So they release it as late in as 2025 as, you know, reasonable, in order to give, you know, enough chance for the numbers to be where they're at. It's very popular. It's doing well. And, you know, and all the rest of it. And, you know, Dan Farah appropriately and smartly makes and runs the media circuit. You have groups like the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, right? You have groups of people in Hollywood who are voting members of the Academy, who are passionate about this, who are going to be advocating for it. You know, in the next week or two, if we pick up an edition of Variety, we're probably going to start seeing the For Your Consideration Age of Disclosure. There's a whole marketing campaign that goes on behind it there. And so long as no other big documentary has come out and people recognize the name when they go to vote, you know, on the Academy members, they're like, oh, Age of Disclosure, I never saw it, but I've heard of it, so I'll vote for it. It very may likely get that award. Should it get that award, then that again becomes the next level of public response and perception that the government has to manage around the issue. So, you know, I think Dan Farah, the you know, maybe, probably Danny Sheehan's, everybody, Tom DeLonge, everyone that has an influence in Hollywood is going to really be pushing for that award, because then it makes it all the more public and all the more difficult to ignore. You know, when Marco Rubio was just in an Academy Award-winning documentary, right? That becomes the narrative going forward. That's what you start pushing.
Well, when you sit there and you think about it, also we have a couple hurdles to get through, like the UAPDA. There's certain Atomic Energy Act that the video I was just about to bring up also. Alan Levine talks about it, about the Atomic Energy Act, just real quick here, Gene.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't need a UAP bill. Don't need it. Congressman Burchett has echoed this. I've shared it in posts. I've shared it in interviews that I've done. Under Title 18, 831, and 832, the federal government has the authority with eminent domain to seize any unregistered nuclear materials or weapons of mass destruction, which a flying saucer would definitely come under. And if you think they wouldn't do it, ask Bob Lazar when in 2017 the FBI descended on his business with a search warrant for, guess what, unregistered nuclear materials.
100%, yeah.
So here's how I characterize that.
Yeah.
That I throw under the my old statement, the facts, though interesting, are irrelevant. Right? So he's absolutely correct in that by law, it's redundant to have the UAP Disclosure Act.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But that's not what they don't want it specifically because they want to create a redundancy. They want it because it creates it begins to change the narrative and begins to put more direction on the issue, right?
Okay.
So yeah, they could run around and enforce it. Listen, it's like guns, right? There are more than enough gun laws that cover absolutely everything that they want to do, but they want to make, but when something happens, they want to make a symbolic gesture by creating a new act that just repeats something that an old act said. So this is where controlled disclosure as which is a term of art in counterintelligence. It's not exclusive to the UAP. There was a point in history where there was controlled disclosure about cigarettes and tobacco,
science,
and science even, right?
Yeah.
But that's reached, controlled disclosure as a term of art has reached its capacity, and is no longer manageable within the framework of all things that controlled disclosure is. And the UAP Disclosure Act and a lot of what we're seeing, I think, this new program with the Department of Energy on the AI, NASA becoming recategorized as an intelligence agency.
Yeah.
All of these things are signals towards what's called transition by design. And this is, how do we walk society, how do we walk the country down the path that we want to walk them down? Well, how you do it is you begin to standardize things amongst the institutions. And so the act begins to get the language in all of the government institutions in a consistent manner and begins to drive and dictate their areas of responsibility. And so as that comes out, and then Department of Education, if that's even still around, what's one still around, the agencies begin to then incorporate things into their language and into their programs that cover it. And we see the same thing going on with our allies, Brazil, the UK, Japan. As you start to see all of these other countries coming on board and doing their own UAP inquiries, it is not by accident. It's because they've been given the green light to say this is the path we're going down. And so you'll see them cascade in the same way. They'll have some hearings, they'll begin to institutionalize some things.
As a UK citizen, I really hope that the current mode of the United States is going to influence my nation to be able to come forward a bit more with more information that we have. We seem to be very, very tight-lipped, and we're still in that stigma phase of anybody mentions it in the UK, you're just laughed away, dismissed as being crazy, and so on and so forth. And I really hope some of our bigger cases can be put out there in the open for the public to kind of look at a bit more. But I think
when it's when it's a political win for somebody, it'll come.
That's my next question. Actually, was Andy brought it up, and got it. one of our fellow members from Thomas Bessler channel, would release be brought about to change the narrative away from the Epstein files?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's not going to be that much of. Again, I know there's a lot of hopefulness in the, who is in the Epstein files and what that means. Again, that is now a, political maneuvering thing. So I see them as distinct issues, and, to just come out and be like, oh, I decided today I want to, talk about UFOs. Again, that's more politically dangerous and more obvious of, a distraction than following a process. Could the announcement of a presidential commission draw some of the energy away from fallout of the episode? Sure. So, yeah, I mean, it's all about timing and political wins. None of this has to do with, who they're trying to protect, or, they're trying to cover things up in the background or anything like that. Because, they all know who has what scheduled and what interview scheduled and with whom and what. And it is everything that is put out there to be timed for our entertainment.
So it's like, it's almost like Amiga Rules had a question also with this too. Like, well, not a question, probably a statement, but first they pull out, Project Bluebeam, then they pull out their own reverse engineered craft. And then is that when we're thinking maybe the real UAPs are showing up now in mass? That, I don't know, it's like almost like the New Jersey drone thing that happened as well. You had certain things that were anomalous in the sky, but then you had
it's still happening.
Yes, still happening.
Oh, still happening, yes. But then you have well, yeah, I know, but you have orbs in the sky, but then you have like hundreds of other things that are mundane that the government threw up there just to throw everybody off.
Yeah. And and that's, so I think it is less so I think we are more likely to again see years before something becomes, and the whole thing, the UAP show up en masse, that's based on the assumption then that there is this close government coordination, and we can call them up and be like, yo, come on down, we blew the lid on everything, let's party. And now there's going to be all sorts of shit in the sky everywhere you go, and they're going to be zooming by us as we're trying to walk through the parking lot, right? When and I've always said it, I think the reality of all of this is going to be much more disappointing than what we've envisioned or are fantasizing about. I tend to be a stoic in a lot of ways. I think whatever the presence of the craft and NHI are, there is a practical purpose that is important to them that they're doing, and we just happen to be here and we happen to catch them. And there's probably some who do, and whose job it is to interact and all the rest of it. It's like anything else. There's going to be a certain number of scientists on their side who are going to be engaged in this work. That doesn't mean 40 million of them are going to show up overnight.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't mean, and not to mog anybody, but, it's the part of the psionics thing and dog whistle stuff that I have trouble with, in the sense is so much, so I can't get my mind around the idea that there are technologically and intellectually superior life forms that have mastered transdimensional travel and interstellar travel that are like hanging around, or do they just jump in their ship suddenly when somebody connects with them or does a dog whistle thing and is like, oh, a human is calling us, we must go? It doesn't reconcile with me that, it's, I think even in the best case, this is not observing and seeing is still not going to be an everyday occurrence for everybody, right? We know there are giant squid. There are 10 people who have seen a giant squid.
Good analogy.
Its natural habitat. But we have photos of it. We have videos of it. We know there's 10 people that are out there studying it and publishing stuff about it.
Yeah.
And that's great. I think this is very much going to be the same thing, that there will be occurrences of sightings, and maybe there will be a moment of an interaction. I do not think that interaction is going to I think we are going to be either be very old or very long gone before the summit takes place, where humans and NHI are sitting around a table, barring a catastrophic type of disclosure event. I think if measured, if it's being worked out, coordinated, I think it is highly unlikely in our lifetime, talking for the three of us, that we are going to see that result come.
So one thing that popped into my head there is we often talk about the word disclosure, but the key word there is closure, actually finishing the story.
Yes.
And we're in this, in this phase at the moment, if you want to call it that. People say drip phase, and it's kind of maybe speeds up and the tap is dripping a bit more faster. Maybe the water main bursts, I don't know, in a catastrophic way. But I think ultimately, while we're talking about disclosure, we should also be thinking about at least closure, potentially. Yeah. But
and
yeah,
that's what the process needs to be, most importantly, our religious institutions, social institutions, education, these are probably the most critical things that need to be addressed and need to be prepared to deal with, the public at large, for any amount of official disclosure that comes out. And that's why I say whatever is known, barring, like age of disclosure, right? People are disappointed. Oh, they didn't talk about this. They didn't talk about that. They didn't listen. The general public, even for me, 6 months in, right? I have the benefit of I can drink through this fire hose, right? I'm retired. I can spend 17 hours a day on this stuff. For the average person, drinking through that fire hose is going to destroy them before it helps them.
Absolutely. I think my girlfriend, she's like kind of on the edge of UFO, and we watched Age of Disclosure, and she was like, "Oh wow, okay, yeah, this really is groundbreaking." For we've made comments about the veterans in the community not taking a great deal away from the documentary, even though there were tidbits in there to dissect. But I think overall it's a positive move forwards in that path of closure.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought Age of Disclosure was very well documented. It wasn't for hardcore UFO nuts or anything. It was for the mainstream public to pull more people into the topic. Like, we're up here sitting at the top. We are the ones that are in charge of these agencies. Here is what we see. Here is what we're dealing with. Here's the pushback we're getting. I like that aspect of it, that it comes out with it.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, it's much more public than the C-SPAN hearing, right?
Yeah.
Now it's on it, right? Nobody's going back on C-SPAN looking for, to go through 2 hours of hearing. We've got the key 30 seconds per person that is on record.
Yes.
And it's on Amazon Prime and wherever. And, I'm sure, again, it'll continue to syndicate and, before we know it, when we're old people and our grandkids are going to be like, "Hey, did you see this?" It'll be on terrestrial public television. We'll be getting it with our old antennas because we don't want whatever the new thing is.
Here's a question for you that I had actually out of the blue that just came to me. Were there some documents of your father-in-law's research that you were not able to translate perfectly, that you're still having difficulty with?
Maybe shorthand or something.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, there's a couple of lines and things like that. So
Okay.
I'll give you like one of the best examples. My friend Jim, I think you know Jim Horak, right?
Yeah.
He's a MUFON field investigator.
Yep. We just talked before this.
Yeah, when we did when I did the press conference, so he had actually done sort of due diligence beforehand, and he was like, he calls it the UFO find of the century. And so I invited him to, speak during the press conference and all that. But we spent one night, well over an hour, dissecting like three to 10. It was like a 10-character line of math. Because he's like, well, he's got this 3 there and da-da-da. I'm like, well, is it a 3? Or is it, there's actually a Cyrillic letter that looks like a 3.
Yeah.
And the one that looks like a 3, is it a little 3 or a bigger 3? Because those are different too. And we spent an hour doing like 10 characters. So, the Russian speaking physicists who have looked at it have said, some of this is needs to be tightened up. Right. Okay. They don't say it's wrong in this because it's right in the papers.
Yeah.
They're like, so the translation, it should really, you chose the thing instead of the 3, and it really should have been a 3. Things like that.
Okay.
There's areas that were just so weird, just as a straight, because again, I wanted to do just a tried and true
straight translation
written here. I don't want to give my opinion and stuff like that. Some places it was impossible to do that because when I looked at the thing, reading it in English, I was still like, what the hell does that mean?
Gotcha.
So those areas I had to kind of massage and come up with some explanations for the best way, that I could. So that's why I said I'm really happy, and again, the end of the book is, the open invitation to say, have at it, world, have at it, scientific, academic community.
I just like how you have your book, and it's one side is the scientific research side, and the other side is the explanation.
Yeah, the original scan.
I love it
with the explanation.
I can't put this book down ever since I got it, and I had to stop. I had to stop the one night because it was like 2:30 in the morning and I had started at 11:30, and I'm just like looking through page by page, going line by line, like, why didn't I see this before?
Yeah. And one of the funniest ones to me is the like some of the, again, physicists.
Yeah.
And, there was one in particular, like he was doing some due diligence for another interview, I was doing. And the initial approach, again, is somewhat academically, superior. I'm a physicist and I'm looking at this stuff. Can you explain da da da? And I kind of give them the 10-cent version. Here's the materials, know. And there have been a number of times that they come back and it's usually some verbiage of the same phrase. Wow, this is really dense. I never, so and believe me, I've gotten into some fights with academics.
I can only imagine.
Who like have looked at it, like literally they like 20 minutes beforehand, they weren't even familiar with it. And then they want to start tearing it apart. And I'm like, I'm going to stop you there because I don't want you to embarrass yourself because, before we get on the air or whatever. Because that's what said, a number of people, they have come back and they're like, oh, this is much more. I mean, Jim's another good example. Where he's like, well, I'm a mechanical engineer or electrical engineer and da 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 da. And then he's like, oh.
His eyes just got real wide looking at it like,
Well, what I say to them too, particularly the academics, and it's what burns my butt on it, is this idea that they become, as I say, intellectually or academically disingenuous when they read something and they're like, that figure is impossible, is this and that. And I'm like, to me, that says all the more that maybe this wasn't built here.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they don't experience physics. Maybe maybe this and that aren't the same. No, physics are universal. And one of them, I was like, oh, and you knew exactly what 3I Atlas was, and you knew, and we were certain about this, and you as an academic, are supposed to be the ones who have this attitude, who begin everything, and it's what I do in intelligence, right? I've got to start with acknowledging I don't know what I don't know, and I've got to work from there. So the idea when I hear somebody talking about, their certainty on what this technology is and how it works and my number one, when it's a challenge to me, my response is simply, well, show me the math, right? I've got here's what I'm bringing to the table. Work it out and let's go back and forth on it, which nobody ever does. But then it's like there's my other point to that is that if you expect, right, when they roll out the UFO on a flatbed truck to be examined if you expect everything in that is going to be something you can go down to Home Depot off the shelf. If you expect that you're going to crack this open and everything in there is going to be familiar and you're going to piece it all together and and understand it, I don't know what kind of scientist or academic you are.
My brain is barely holding on from reading some of what I've already read in the book so far. And it's just like, it's very well structured. I will say that. As far as the book goes and how it goes into the research, extremely well structured.
Well, I mean, again, I call myself an author just because that's what they make me call. I'm the custodian of the documents, and I can't take credit for anything. And all I'm doing is parroting what he has in there and parroting what I'm able to figure out from it, what other people explain to me.
Yeah, I give you credit for not letting it die. It came in your lap and you did something with it. You didn't look at it and say, no, this is a bunch of garbage. You looked through it. You went page by page and you dug into it. And I applaud you for that. You didn't let it die. You brought it out.
I appreciate that, Jay. But as a fellow veteran, part of what motivates me is just anger, right? Just anger that you didn't want to answer an email.
Yeah.
And unfortunately I have nothing better to do.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that you did bring it out, and I'm going to put this up on the screen here. This is Gene's book, came out. Wonderful book.
And I've got the new one.
I like it. I like it how you have it structured as far as like the one side is the actual document you can look at with Russian and everything, and then you have the translation. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and on the website, people, all of the documents, they still have to. Again, it's very tedious. I have to reorder them all in the right way, but I've got a box in the website of just the scan. But you can blow it up and zoom in on it. Because again, people, it's AI generated and this and that. You can see the pen strokes. You can see the difference in weights of pressure of the hand.
Yeah.
You can see the rusting of the paper clip in some of them. You know,
It's
that
a heck of a story. I mean, like it really does take the complete biscuit on kind of, you know, and to end up with Engineering Infinity as a book which contains schematics, science, physics from former Soviet Russia by way of your father-in-law. So the kind of, like, dare I use the phrase nuts and bolts community are going to hopefully plow into this and like kind of go, yeah, you know, and for amateur folk as well, I think kind of like it's a roller coaster of a story, and it's ongoing, and dare I say kind of on occasion I may watch Weaponized with Jeremy and you know, when George Knapp, and I may on occasion have got a reply from Jeremy, and I might say, hey, you know, Gene is here, he wants to speak to George as well, you know, we need to kind of get this paperwork together somehow.
Yeah,
right.
he might love that. I've slammed him a few times too. I think I'm the reason he started wearing a tie too, because people that I know, that who I have met, who I know are very close to him, I have been very consistent, and I've said it online too. Stop trying to be a military a veteran avatar with your you know, you look like every veteran owned coffee company CEO and your Paris Island t-shirts and all the rest of it. You know, drop it. And there was a couple of, it was not long afterwards I started seeing him in ties. So
well, here's
maybe aware of me on
the emails are getting through. He's just embarrassed to reply, maybe. I don't know.
Listen, and I have no doubt, and you know, and I stand on this, and I I've spoken with Ross Coulthard, and I've said the same thing to him. You know, I am skeptical, and I hold those that call themselves investigative journalists to a very high standard. And I am very public, and I will sit and, you know, I will say it to their face because I think it's important for the public to know. And I do not believe, listen, I'm sure they're the nicest people in the world. I would love to sit down and have coffee and cigars with them, a couple of old fashions. I'm sure we could have a wonderful, fun time together. You're not an investigative journalist, though, right? You are an access journalist. You're a disclosure themed content creator. You don't really investigate anything.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, then it's up to you to change my perception, because my experience, this is what my experience tells me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where my assessment comes from. And so it's up to you to change my mind, you know, and I don't say it to down your brand or whatever, but if we're talking about transparency, then it has to start with you yourself.
I think I heard there a future or a Ross Coulthard interview on News Nation, perhaps, or something has occurred. Have you got can you
sometime the beginning of December? We had
December.
Natalia and I sat down with them, and
wow, that's only
of December. I'm sorry.
Well, the next couple of weeks, keep an eye on that, definitely. Yeah. And like, yeah, I hope that is received in the way that it should be received, basically, and that, you know, you might have to, you know, hopefully the phone's going to start ringing. The kind of it's going to go crazy for you, because it's a heck of a story, dude. You know,
I often wonder, you know, and like I say, as I'm here with you guys, and Jay and I have met, you know, in person. Jay'll tell you I'm the exact same person here that I am, you know, when there's no camera or whatnot. So that might be to my detriment of anybody wanting to actually have me on the air.
Editing.
Yeah. I was gonna say your father-in-law gave you this research, put it in your lap, you went through it. It's the sounding of a future documentary film, because it's like you have, and then at the end of it, you know, all of this, your father-in-law had passed away before you had a chance to talk to him about it. He's sitting up there going, you know, he did it, you know, he's pushing it forward like I wanted. I didn't want it to sit on the dust, on the shelf collecting dust, and in this age, you've spoken to your father-in-law before, though, not about this, but about other things. What advice do you think that your father-in-law would give for future engineers and for if he could give a message like from beyond the grave, what do you think it would be?
You're gonna get me all emotional.
I'm sorry, I had to ask it, man. I did.
I would hope that if there was a lesson that came out of it, and I think it reflects, I've found camaraderie with him as well through all of this, because I said it before, Jay, you probably know as yourself too, as a veteran, right? The hardest thing in the transition to civilian life is having a mission and having purpose. And so I would think, I would hope that in the same way as he was somebody who seems to have given over his life and his work to an ideology, to the service of his nation, that he realized how quickly and abruptly that could all fall apart, and that it could leave you without that sense of purpose and that sense of mission. And so, what's the takeaway of that? I think the takeaway is the universal truth for all of us that, we believe so much in the things that we do for other purposes that we neglect ourselves, we overlook our families and things like that. And so that in whatever you do, continue to make sure that your family, comes first. And because that is, your most important legacy. And even within all of this and these papers and whatever comes of them, it is what it has done, for my wife and for me and our relationship and our son, his grandson, our extended family. That this is really, and I've been criticized for it, for always making an emotional family story. It is. It's a story in part about legacy, and it's a story about family, and that's why I say, even for the material itself and the nature of the material, for the general public, for whom it's undigestible in a sense, that's why I try to make all of these other things available, the research, the connections. If there's any ask, my ask isn't even go buy the book, download. I don't even care if you do that. I don't care if anybody does that. My ask is to take the message and take the questions and bring those questions forward and ask, why does this stuff match? How does this exist? How does this work? How are these connections done? Because it's more about advancing that accountability and more about advancing disclosure and having this as a tool to try and get that done when everything's going against us, when we if we don't want to sit back and wait, if we need to push it, this is the way to push it. Make the demands, ask the questions, right? That hearing I want to see is not another whistleblower, as God bless them, as great as they are. I want the heads of Boeing and DARPA and the Secretary of Defense answering questions about the origins of science and 40 years of programs.
100%. That's exactly what I want to see as well. Go ahead. The last thing I was going to say would be George, if you had anything else you wanted to ask him, and I was waiting to see if anybody had any questions for you as well.
Yeah. I wanted to express my thanks, Gene, for coming in today and talking to us and giving us some more background. I'm really looking forward to the Ross Coulthard thing. Like I say, I might see you in a back channel, Mr. Fessler's thing at some point. And when I didn't know anything about the story until a few days ago, to be honest with you. So my initial thing, like, you have a very astute mind which processes data in a very specific and a specific way, with a broad mindset to be able to bring this information out to us in a nascent and topical way. And the timing of it is perfect, mate. You know, there's like everything seems to be happening at the moment, and then there's people talk about the edges of the puzzle. And maybe, like this engineering infinity and also the blueprints that you have are able to kind of be part of that puzzle overall. And I think, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was very kind and generous words. And all I can say in response to, that beautiful compliment of my brain, it's brought to you courtesy of the United States government. They created the monster themselves. So,
well, they seem to be doing a good job. That's for sure. So, thank you. I think
I'm happy to. I got time to hang out for more questions or anything.
Yeah, I'm just if anybody had any, they could go ahead and ask them now. I know somebody wanted to know what kind of necklace I was wearing. It's an argon necklace with a design.
Interesting.
So I have an argon stone on the inside of this.
Looks
and
a bit
it's
like
surrounded by a magnet, and I could feel it when I go like this. I could actually feel it like vibrating very slightly.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So engineeringinfinitybook.com. Go and order a copy, PDF or hardback. Everyone start emailing George Knapp. Get Gene, they need those copies.
I don't even want to talk to him now.
Here is the website.
I hear that. I think, but yeah, it's just the blueprints. There we go. Look.
Yeah. And real quick up top there, you see field investigator resources. Again, that could be a whole other hour. But those are, essentially I've extracted. So I looked for the optimum conditions that would be needed for the craft to operate and identified them in each state. And so there's a small team of us right now, a couple of people you both know, so I ran 2 tests, one in December 24 and one in August of this year. And so there's a couple of teams that are actually taking to the field right now, hunting instead of going to where things have been reported. They're using the data of where the optimum conditions exist for craft to operate within. And they're going to these areas, and so far we've kind of been 2 for 2, and so we got a couple more hopefully coming in the next. There's certain windows, and I won't give away the whole secret sauce right here, but it's actually all right there in the documents that I posted for anyone that wants to go.
I gotta ask one question though.
Yeah.
Have you when with the deep dive? With these locations that you've gone to, I know you haven't gone to many, but with the locations, have you noticed the pre-layering of granite material, like you said, you're like in those photos that you showed? You like the pre-layering of certain minerals for that area to negate UFO activity.
Well, that's that's sort of what led to finding these optimum conditions is what led to that discovery in central New York.
Okay.
So that the situation there, it's an old nuclear facility that was decommissioned in 2000. They took all the nukes out, and what's been found in the area is essentially, as I call it, geological engineering. That
Yes.
seems to that these layers of stone, artificial stone, or non-native stone, let's say, strategically placed in opposite directions of the natural geology, and based on the numbers of reports that used to happen, and the idea is that the military figured out these similar parameters that the craft used to operate and began geoengineering the areas around nuclear facilities in order to dampen the signals and make it more difficult, perhaps, for a craft to operate. That's
And
sort
that
of the
would be
working theory.
And that would be extremely easy to actually research. If anybody wants to research it, you could look up granite, any granite or slab or anything like that, granite companies or mining companies in the area, and you ask them, did you have any loads of certain materials that went to this facility? And it's an open source freedom of information request.
Well, and the reality, and again, God bless the people that do, help out. But,
Yeah.
I sit here by myself most of the time trying to, get a lot of stuff done and juggle between different ideas and projects. But, it wouldn't even take that phone call, Jay. It would just take scrubbing the contracts that were awarded during those periods and,
Exactly.
identifying those patterns.
And that's all I had, Gene. That was the only question I had, was the geoengineering part, because that interested me a lot, because it was the fact that we knew about it. We already knew about it. It was already out there, and we were pre-planning before it had got there, which means that we already knew that it was going to come.
Well, it's the same thing with the defense, right?
Mhm.
Where I said, found these programs that could defend against the craft. It's the same situation of why I think like Bob Salas cannot testify about, Malmstrom. None of these guys can testify about the nukes, because then what has to happen, undoubtedly, then you have to have another hearing about, nuclear weapons safety and security. And so you can't talk about the countermeasures that you have or the things that you've done to prevent this type of incident without admitting that you know what it was that caused the incident, that you've now implemented technology that you're trying to prevent it.
Yeah, and that, like
So
you said, it's very
way.
easy to find, because you've got, you research Malmstrom Air Force Base, research it before, of what it had there before a UFO incident, and then afterwards, what kind of materials differently did they bring in? Done.
Right. That becomes the conundrum in this, is that they can't answer one thing, which without explaining, then how did you know that thing was a threat?
Yeah. Or it was going to be in that area.
Or it was going to be a threat. And that's, to me, part of like the whole bizarre thing with it anyway, right? Is that the government generally doesn't do anything until they are responding to an assessed threat.
Yeah, true.
So at some point you assessed these things as something as a threat, and you came up with actual technological countermeasures to a threat which you were assessing.
Yeah.
But then how do you know those countermeasures would be effective against the threat if you haven't examined the threat?
Exactly. Exactly. It's the circle. You hit any piece in that circle, and you're going to end up going around it.
That's why I say it's, it's out there. It's just getting the, and that's why, in the world of the hearing I'd love, that's what makes it so brilliant, because you can walk them down the path. And believe me, there's nothing I love more than a good interrogation. I've done it when my son was 12. He had a little thing at school, and he made me drag it out of him. I had to go through step by painful step. Well, walk me through this. We'll do this. And, it all got sorted out, but my wife called me a ball buster at the end of it. And I said, the sick thing about it is I follow that same process. I've done it with mafia figures, with terrorists, with murderers, with, this and that. And I have the exact same satisfaction breaking a 12-year-old boy as I got breaking one of them, getting the information out of them.
Oh boy.
But that's what I'm saying. In a hearing like that, then you will see in their eyes, if I answer this the wrong way, I am now committing perjury.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get you start getting the Fifth Amendment, maybe if we're lucky.
I'll leave it. I'm done with my question, George. You want to go ahead, George, and then
I'm done as well.
Oh, you're done too.
Well, I want to give a shout out to Jill.
Yeah.
Jill's in here.
We got a group here in Massachusetts we call Wicked Alien. Wicked is our thing.
Yeah, I got Wicked Alien is on my on me and George's Discord channel, for Galactic Family Podcast. And,
great.
Yeah,
great
he's on there too. He's great, man. He's
the New
great.
England folks and try and get, there's really not a big, really well-connected community here. So that's sort of the purpose of Wicked Alien.
Yeah.
We've had a symposium. We had another get-together a couple of weeks ago. Ryan Graves showed up. So we had dinner with Ryan with a bunch of people.
Photo of Ryan Graves, I may have seen one just in a back chat.
Right before he went to New York for the Age of Disclosure. I was supposed to go, but I started some medication, wasn't up to traveling. So,
well,
thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Anything?
It's a real pleasure.
And anything else that you come up with? Because I know I picked your brain on the underwater, areas as well too, and you sent me that list. That list is great. I've been going down at like these locations. I've been talking to George and stuff about, and now that you're checking the land ones, I'm wondering now. There's certain spots in the ocean that have these like perfectly square, like cut out, like Lego block cut out of the ocean bottom, and I'm thinking, man, that could be a deep dive right there.
Well, I had some week or two the same night we went to dinner with Ryan Graves. Before that, I was on another call with the Tedesco brothers, and so hopefully we're gonna have some, again, shared all that information with them as well. So hopefully we'll have more interaction with them and see about guiding some of their research, particularly if these other teams come back and we wind up having a good record on the anticipated locations.
Yes, if you can narrow down the location spans, then you've got the Tedesco brothers that go in and
so a lot of exciting stuff happening behind the scenes. It's not just all boring old physics.
Well, I hope for all the best for you, Gene, and everything that comes your way, because I believe it needs to get out there. And
hopefully you can come back and give us some updates.
Yes, some updates.
Yeah, anytime. Absolutely.
And I'll give it to you for the last thing, and then we'll call it a night.
Off to me?
Yeah, to you, Gene.
Oh, no, that was it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And, I've given out my messages. So, anyone's welcome to reach out. I try to answer, the best I can. What I do answer is based upon what I know. So, and if it's outside my area of scope of knowledge, I will tell you that. So don't be mad or disappointed in me.
Oh, hey, if they actually sit down and read the book, they will be like me, and they will just be like, my brain hurts. I need a Tylenol. So, but at Omega Rules, thank you for the $2 super chat. I really appreciate that. It helps us, continue what we're doing. I know we just had a great show also. George was there as well on video. We had the dog donation that we did, $1,000 worth of dog donation stuff,
great.
Beds, cat beds, food, and it was wonderful. And this is what keeps us going, the super chats, the likes, the shares, to keep this this giving community going, because we're, like you, Gene, you put out the book to put out the information. You're already retired. You already make the money. You don't need any of that. I'm retired, medically from the military. I don't need the money to do things. I like to just put stuff out and get more people to see it. You know, it's not about, you know, and if, you know, the $100 that you get, you know, runs the website, cool. That's all you need. Yeah. Same with me. You know, exactly. I get like $100 and it runs like my Chat GTP that I have premium and StreamYard. I don't need anything else. You know, all the rest of it goes to community events that we're going to sponsor here, like with the animals, with, you know, different things. We're looking into different things to donate to.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. And I, like I said, same thing. We do the, you know, opera company and you know, pour things into that. Oh, look at that. Well, isn't she?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, if you want to hit me up sometime, lady,
Natalie, I appreciate it. Like, it's
thank you.
It all goes to a good cause. Doesn't go to me. Doesn't go to anything else. It goes into a fund, and that fund gets used for the animals, for different things that we have going on. Nothing else gets taken out of it.
And so for those tuned in, please depress the like button gently. No need to smash anything.
That's why I got to put gently tap that like button, because everybody says smash it. No, don't break your keyboard, please.
Please like, subscribe, and
all right, Gene. I will end the stream now. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight, and more to come. Much more to come. I think I might join or get a hold of you after this, Gene, and see if I can't do some groundwork myself in some of these locations for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. And like we always say on Galactic Family Podcast, we're one species born of Earth. We spread peace, love, and understanding throughout the galaxy. That's what we're here for. Thank you, everyone. And till next time.
Till next time.